Thank you for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We are committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, regulatory actions, and political maneuvers in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact your freedoms.
Please support the State of Freedom by becoming a monthly supporter or member of the Warrior Circle, or by advertising your business, your nonprofit, or your event with us. Go to freedomstate.us. We are bypassing the mainstream media cartel and the establishment political parties in Louisiana and coming directly to you, spreading the uncensored voice of freedom across Louisiana and beyond. Fuego, it's just unbelievable. Whether it's the flame-grilled carne asada or a signature mango margarita. I had one of those too. They're serving up a literal feast of freedom at Calle Fuego. It's just extraordinary. I love the owners, Andres and Jose. They run such a great restaurant. The service is extraordinary. The atmosphere is great. So if you're in Pineville and the Alexandria area or passing through, or if you live there, go to Calle Fuego and tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom, where we are grounded in faith in the Constitution, and we're committed to giving voice to the truth, living with courage, and taking action. We have made it to Thursday, folks. It's Thursday, March 26th. It's 8 a.m. Central, and we are so happy to be with you. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, the Watchdog in Chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander, and we are coming to you live on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Please, if you're in the chat, say hello, say good morning, take a moment to hit the thumbs up button if you're not driving, and share this with your friends, especially anybody who cares about the issues related to private property, carbon capture and sequestration, or just generally what's happening in the state, because we've got a lot of ground to cover this morning. You can also catch us later on our audio-only podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Today, joining us is our friend Gary Musgrove. He is a vocal advocate for property rights in the fight against carbon capture sequestration, and he is the president of Save My Louisiana. Let me bring Gary forward. All right.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Gary. And while he's with us, we'll touch on some of the major bills that his organization is focused on, as well as later we will delve into plenty of other topics. So bills that impact your freedom, your pocketbook, your voice, and so much more. Before we get into it this morning, let me read the scripture of the day. It is 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, and it says, "Most of all, I'm writing to encourage you to pray with gratitude to God. Pray for all men with all forms of prayers and requests as you intercede with intense passion. And pray for every political leader and representative so that we would be able to live tranquil, undisturbed lives as we worship the awe-inspiring God with pure hearts. It is pleasing to our Savior God to pray for them. He longs for everyone to embrace his life and return to the full knowledge of the truth." And I know this is a familiar scripture for many of you, but I've brought it to the show numerous times. But it's such a great reminder here especially at the start of session. It can be so easy for us to get caught up in fighting on the issues that we forget to pray for the legislators who bring the legislation. It can be so easy for us, I'm speaking to myself here, to get in a fixed mindset about the way I view people's motives or their character, especially the political leaders of this state, and it makes us hard. We're making it hard on ourselves to pray for them when we do that. So this morning is a great time to remember the condition of our own soul when we encountered the love of Jesus. Like the Apostle Paul said, let us recall that we were the worst of sinners before putting our faith in Jesus and being transformed. And we're still daily being changed as we walk out our salvation. The Lord said that his arm is not too short. He can reach any of these leaders. He can reach any wayward one. So let's remember that in our personal prayer time, let's remember that in our personal prayer time. And as we go throughout session, just ask the Lord for prayer assignments to cover these political leaders in prayer. And why don't I just lead us in a prayer for our political
Absolutely.
leaders this morning? Jesus, you you move the hearts of kings like channels of water. Nothing is hard for you. You don't look at the situation in Louisiana or in our country or in our world and say that it's hopeless. It's not surprising to you. It's not stressing you out. I pray, Lord, that you would return the hearts of the leaders of this state to you. I pray that you would protect them, that you would cover them, that you would give them wisdom, that you would give them divine insight. Give them great courage, Lord, to do the right thing for the people. God, remind them why they ran for office in the first place. Return them to the first principles that got them to run, Lord. And if those weren't good principles, Lord, turn them to your heart. And we just ask this, and we are just thankful that we live in a state where the majority of people love you, and we just are asking you to bring us into righteous governance. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. What a beautiful prayer, Danielle. It is such an important reminder that, as we've talked about before, how we do things is just as important as what we do. And, we have to remember that in the final analysis, there's not going to be any carbon capture sequestration pipelines in heaven. Thank God.
Thank God.
And that all of this does pass away, and all that
Yeah.
really is faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. And in the end, that's all that resonates in eternity. But we are charged to fight to build the kingdom of God right here on earth,
Yeah.
and we cannot use the ultimate victory as an excuse or a justification for inaction right here. We are supposed to act in order to protect our families, in order to protect our state, in order to protect each other. And our guest today has done that quite boldly, and I'll say effectively, since this carbon capture sequestration menace came on the scene. Not his first time on the show. Gary Musgrove, what a pleasure to have you on the State of Freedom, sir.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate those kind words. I know we're kind of limited on time, but it would behoove me not to offer up prayers and condolences for a pillar of our community who tragically passed away this past week, and that was retired Rapid Sheriff Hilton. Passed away tragically, and he was loved by many people, not just in his parish, but statewide as well. And he's going to be missed. A lot of our organization members were quite dear to him and friends with him. So I want to offer up our prayers and support to their family in this time of
Absolutely.
um,
And Gary, my understanding is that he was particularly close to Mike Slocum.
very close. That was
Yeah.
Mike's mentor.
Yes, I sent Mike a message of condolence yesterday, and I didn't know Sheriff Hilton, but from what I've heard about him, he was just an extraordinary man and influenced people just very,
Very,
not only deeply, but very broadly, a lot of people that he had a big impact on.
yes, he did. He sure did.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And, it's in these moments when it's both overwhelming and reassuring to know that God does indeed reign.
Yeah.
You know,
Amen.
But Gary, I want to get cranked up here with you on this carbon capture sequestration. Danielle and I had an opportunity to go through, well, not only all the carbon capture and sequestration bills, but all 77 million, I'm joking, all 1,400 or 1,500 bills that don't do with CCS, but I know we're talking about carbon capture and sequestration today. What is on the horizon in particular that you are anticipating right now?
Right at this moment, we are gearing up in support of HB 7. That's the bill that was sponsored by Mike Johnson. Should be hitting the Natural Resources Committee on the 31st. So we have actively engaged with that. Mark and and Mike have been engaged in some of the language of that bill that we now feel very satisfied that if this bill passes, Chris, it will do away with our lawsuit. That's how good
Yeah.
the bill is.
And that's really wonderful that you would say that. I had a chance to look at the lawsuit with Danielle, and I agree with you on that point. And I'm glad to know that that everybody is on board on HB7. And just for the benefit of our listeners, HB7 will completely nullify or negate the right of any private company to basically steal your property against your will in order to construct these carbon sequestration pipelines or to inject the CO2 under your property. If you don't want it, you don't get it. Bottom line, and of great benefit, if I'm not mistaken about this, Gary, is that it would have retroactive effect, which means that it would nullify retroactively any permits that have already been issued. If that's still in the bill, I know it was originally. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Also, in in the recent ruling, on March 6th, with the Louisiana Supreme Court ruling on eminent domain, actually kicking that ruling back to Article 1, Section 4 in its original intent, is astonishing that we are still having to deal with this.
I couldn't
Uh,
agree with you more.
but they did pass legislation, and now we got to tackle these legislations that was passed, these statutes. But I'm hoping our legislators are, reading the tea leaves and realizing that this build out is over.
And again,
This
Gary, for the
this
benefit of
carbon
our listeners,
capture.
just so people could, I just want people
Mhm.
to know just the case here, and then I really want to hear your thoughts on it. But the case that Gary is talking about is a recent Louisiana Supreme Court case, which very emphatically rejected the idea that any private corporation has the right to use what we call eminent domain or seizure of private property for purely economic benefit, which at this point everyone knows that's exactly what CCS is, nothing more and nothing less than a boondoggle that enriches big corporations. But Gary, you got to talk about this. Why is it that, I mean, I called this on our social media the gut shot. The Louisiana Supreme Court delivered the gut shot to land seizures in Louisiana, and you don't hear a word. You don't hear a
No.
word among the legislators. You don't hear a word among the CCS hustlers. This is the Louisiana Supreme Court that basically jurisprudentially just crushed this whole enterprise, and yet you don't hear a word. They're going forward with all this legislation like we don't have a Louisiana Supreme Court decision that just basically cut the legs out from under them. Why is that?
It's simple. It's the 71 billion dollar economic build out that the administration keeps promoting as the Louisiana economic future, all riding on the back of carbon capture and sequestration. And when you look at the whole scope of this, now you're talking about industries that the governor has gone out, and pulled to Louisiana, such as Hyundai Steel. Uh, the purpose of that plant coming here is to sequester their carbon. That's how they're going to get the low carbon steel, and also the ammonia plants. So that whole economic district down in Donaldsonville that is being pulled out. Those people, I think it was about 17,000 acres, Chris. Many of which property owners right now are going through eminent domain issues over that, and so you have a huge industry, a lot of money riding on the back of eminent domain. When you take eminent domain out, this economic development that LED and the governor has been pushing throughout the state collapses.
Yeah,
Now,
it does.
now, I hate for that to happen, but they built this industry off the climate change hoax and off the backs of Louisiana property owners. They
That's
got
right.
the cart before the horse. And now Louisiana has woken up to what they've done. And I think that's why you're not hearing anything, Chris.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe it is just the collective silence of absolute grief. I don't know what it is. Danielle and I know I told Danielle this, but Danielle's representative. I think she's your representative, Danielle, Jessica Domain, perhaps in an effort to advance the stature of carbon capture and sequestration, inadvertently revealed something that many of us know, but was very devastating to carbon capture in a recent hearing when she asked the head of Louisiana Economic Development what of the $100 billion currently coming into Louisiana on economic development, what percentage of that is based upon carbon capture and sequestration? And she said about 75%, 50 or 75% of it is based direct. So of the 100 billion, 60 billion of it is directly related to carbon capture and sequestration. And Gary, you pull that out, where's the economic development? So
Yeah.
maybe they're
That's right.
just absolutely devastated by the reality of it, that they want to act like this doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I also just want to, maybe for the benefit of listeners who haven't caught this conversation in the past, when you talk about this bill, HB 7, making the seizure of private property retroactive, that doesn't mean for people who have already signed contracts, right, Chris? Would you just talk about that a little bit?
That's a great point. That's a great point. If money has changed hands and the deal has been closed, you can't go back and undo it. But if there's a permit that's been issued and they're in the process of trying to get eminent domain, if the process has not been completed, then my understanding is that this retroactively nullifies any effort to continue these property seizures. The only ones that would be exempt would be ones that have been consummated and completed. And thank you, Danielle, for reminding me to point that out.
Yeah, and I'd love for the folks in the chat, anybody watching who's able, maybe just drop a check mark in the chat if you think that HB 7 is going to pass and we'll get rid of this eminent domain, at least at the committee level. We can see it move forward, and put an X or some negative some negative symbol if you think we're not going to even make it past the committee. I'd love to know what people in the chat think that have been following this.
Gary,
Chris, let
what
me
are
give
your
you,
thoughts? What are
yeah,
your
let me give
thoughts
you
on
an,
this?
a,
Yeah.
let me give you an example how impactful this would be. I spoke to some landowners up in Caldwell Parish. There's a class 5 pending class 6 approval for Louisiana Green Fuels. And there's a landowner in the middle of that imposed unionization block that does not want to sign the contract. And they're at the point now where they could be facing litigation for expropriation if they don't sign that contract. Well, if HB 7 goes through, and just the ruling on the Supreme Court ruling with the Plaquemines Port and the plaintiff, these landowners now have some sense of relief that there's hope that they do not lose their property
Yeah.
to eminent domain, nor are they going to be forced into a unionization by the Commissioner of Energy.
Yeah,
It's
Gary.
wonderful.
That's so. I'm so glad you brought that out. Can you imagine being in that situation? Wow.
Yeah, it
Absolutely.
gives them the backup they need to be able to stand up against this, to know that there's something standing behind them.
And what everyone listening needs to understand when we talk about eminent domain, um, that doesn't mean, and I've said this before, that doesn't mean the state comes in and forces you into a contract against your will. That means if you don't sign the contract, they take your land from you and you have nothing.
Yeah.
They're going to take whatever land they want for the pipeline, and they're going to take the pore space that they need, and they will give it to that vendor, whoever it is.
That's exactly
For
right.
example, in Caldwell Parish, it would be Louisiana Green Fields. But
That's exactly right.
you'll hear people like Jessica say, "Well, eminent domain's never been used." Well, that's in regards to CO2 pipelines and carbon sequestration. Well, it's
Yes.
just starting, Chris. I mean, they built the foundation, and right now implementation is we're at the door of implementation,
That's right.
and that's what we're stopping.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that the threat or specter of eminent domain hasn't scared people into making decisions that they wouldn't have otherwise made, right? I mean,
Excellent point.
Absolutely. No, that's correct. No, nor does this actually, and I want everyone to understand this as well. Um, this affects eminent domain private property rights. Okay, this doesn't stop sequestration. Understand that. It's not
Yeah.
stopping sequestration. The state is still going to, this administration is still going to push, along with industry, a way to make this happen, whether it be
Exactly.
under public lands, state-owned lands, or raising the contract threshold, so making it so lucrative that larger landowners, I mean, will do it. And
Yes.
I'm hoping not, but then we're faced with another trajectory of legal action,
And
and
that's why it's so important to remember, Gary. Yeah.
that would be protection of the Chico Aquifer.
Yes.
and isn't it so sinister to think that they would be this the the people who are brokering these deals on behalf of the state would be more willing to put the people's private property up for sale or for offer than they would state land. I mean, to me, it just shows that there's a very big disconnect between the people who think that they're leading this state in the right direction and the people who have to suffer the consequences.
Yeah, it does, and I mean, it called me a conspiracy theorist, but why wouldn't state land be the first to be approached?
Right.
Well, I'll tell you why. In my opinion,
Okay.
because the state has the mineral rights to those lands, and if there's oil and gas, do you think the state wants to do anything to jeopardize any mineral rights? But for us small landowners, like I heard recently, the quarter acre a mobile home with the blocked up truck in the front yard. Well, anyhow, that's still that man's kingdom.
That's right.
And
Absolutely. I love that, Gary. I love it. That's his kingdom, and it means as much to him as your, as the Chico State Park may mean to the Department of Natural Resources. You're exactly right.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I want to
Yeah.
read a couple comments in the chat because they're good and encouraging. James says, blessings, be encouraged, be strengthened, and be blessed in the most precious name of Jesus Christ. Thank you, James. Same to you. Louisiana, I think this might be Saved by Louisiana, is saying state owned land belongs to the people. Amen. It absolutely does. James says prayer changes things. Yeah, definitely. And and then Holly says, I don't understand why carbon capture is still being pushed after President Trump revoked the EPA's Unclean Act. I think it's because the 45Q tax credits are still in place, so there's still cash to be had on that front. But
Yeah.
Gary, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're correct.
And
Absolutely.
and
And I
Gary, do you
think,
want?
oh, I'm sorry. You go ahead, Danielle.
No, sorry, Chris. I was just going to ask him. I know you had wanted to mention or talk a little bit about Representative Guyman's House Bill 804. It's not one that Chris and I have brought up before.
Mhm.
It's would you get into that for a little bit?
Yeah, we've been digesting it. We've been going through it. I'm concerned and about this bill, especially when it pertains to property rights and the ability for a plaintiff to sue based on emissions. So publicly, House Bill 804 has been defended as narrowly focused effort to prevent the climate change activists from filing frivolous lawsuits related to the emissions from fossil fuels. Um, but uh, but the critical inquiry is not how the bill is described, but how it functions within the legal system, Chris. You know, Lady Justice is blind.
Yep.
And it's not a matter of law. When I say that, it's statutes do not distinguish between plaintiffs based on their perceived motivations or political affiliations. Courts evaluate claims according to their legal substance. And it's not the identity of the party bringing them. So when you try to take the climate activists and lump them into a group and you make law pertaining that to protect another group, the court doesn't see it that way. The court sees this as plaintiffs, not as climate activists. And that's
Yeah.
why we're concerned about this.
Yeah. Gary, my take on 804, I looked at it, fairly closely, and on the surface, there's no question that the bill makes it very difficult for. It appears as though the bill protects oil and gas companies who are
Mhm.
not doing carbon capture and sequestration in conjunction with their oil and gas work. Okay, they're not doing CCS, so therefore there are going to be significantly greater greenhouse gas emissions because they're not doing CCS, and this legislation purports to protect them against lawsuit from climate activists or people who say, because of all these
Mhm.
increased greenhouse emissions, I've been damaged, therefore I want to sue the oil and gas companies. Now, the bill makes it difficult for someone to sue an oil and gas company under those circumstances. The problem that I have with 804 is that it says that it creates a right or a cause of action for a someone who's injured by climate change to bring a lawsuit under three circumstances. One, if there's a federal law that mandates strict limitation on CO2 emissions, if there's a state law that mandates strict limitations on CO2 emissions, talking about the oil companies,
Mhm.
or if there is a permit, a validly issued permit on an oil and gas company in conjunction with their work that imposes a strict limitation on CO2 emissions. So we have a DENR here, a conservation department here in Louisiana that is obviously sympathetic to carbon capture and sequestration. So
Mhm.
they issue a permit to an oil and gas company, and in that permit is a very strict limitation on the amount of CO2 that can be emitted in their processes. So what do they have to do? They have to do carbon capture and sequestration in order to comply with that permit. And so, and if they don't go forward and they have, and they don't do the reduced emissions, then somebody can bring a lawsuit against them for not following the permit that requires them to reduce their CO2. So what I'm saying is, I know this is very confusing, but indirectly, I think this bill sets up it sets up a narrow scheme whereby the very permitting process in Louisiana could create a cause of action against an oil company and create an incentive whereby an oil company says, I have to do CCS because the permit is basically mandating it. And I'm not talking about eminent domain, Gary. I'm not talking about any of that.
No,
Say eminent
no,
domain is totally out and it's all
right,
voluntary. But what
right.
I'm saying is, I'm concerned about the bill because it puts a lot of control and power into the hands of this, our conservation department and that permitting process, which is very sympathetic to carbon capture and sequestration.
Yes, and even the local governments, such as police juries or whatever, they have to seek approval for not only them, but the governor, the attorney general, and a legislative body that governs this.
If they want to bring, if the state wants to bring a suit alleging climate damage against an oil company, if the state's the plaintiff, you're right. All of those entities have to sign off
Meaning,
on it.
yeah, meaning or a subdivision thereof, such as a police
Correct.
jury.
Yes, or a
They would have
subdivision
to.
thereof. Exactly.
That's right. Would have to seek that. But that it is so narrowly written that it also lumps a landowner, a plaintiff, just a common landowner who seeks to sue on whether that, let's just say, carbon capture or sequestration that migrates to his land. Um, the burden of evidence has now gotten so high that the plaintiff is now restricted, in my understanding, on his lawsuit
Yeah.
that he would be able to file, based on those damages. My understanding, I understand the purpose and the intent. I just don't. I think it's just narrowly written to the point to where Lady Justice is not going to distinguish from advocacy organizations such as the Sierra Club
Yes,
versus a
that's a good
landowner.
point. Well, certainly, Gary, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind. It is not always so faithfully implemented here in the state of
Right.
Louisiana. But you're right. But my interpretation of this is that it is designed to protect, uh, to limit lawsuits against oil and gas companies that do not do carbon capture and sequestration in
Mhm.
connection with their work. I'm concerned about the provision in this bill that essentially creates a cause of action for climate change if if based upon the violation of a permit from the state that requires strict limitations on CO2 emissions. So an oil company has either one of two choices. They can either obey the permit and strictly limit their CO2 emissions, which necessarily requires them to do CCS, or they don't follow the permit and they don't limit their CO2 emissions, which creates a direct cause of action for someone alleging climate damage. That's the issue that I have with the bill. And I don't
Yeah.
really trust our permitting. I don't trust, they've made it very clear, Gary, our Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is neck deep in this fraud.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely, Chris.
not to mention
Absolutely.
economic development, Louisiana.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But
The,
Gary, you've got a. What about the local bills on the ones that would bring the authority back to the local governments? Chuck Owens had one last year. I'm so
Mhm.
eager to hear your opinion on this. All of the bills in one form or another, and as you know, there are a number of local option CCS bills, Danielle, and it seems like we found
Yeah,
one
I know.
every 10 or
It-
12 bills. What do you think about
I'm kind of
those?
right. I'm kind of torn with that bill, and I'll tell you why. I've shared this with you, Chris. When you look at framing legislation, it must foundationally stand upon life, liberty, and property. Those are the three elemental foundations that when anytime you bring legislation before the people, those are the pillars which it stands on. And if you bring this to a local, I want to see it done away with completely.
yeah.
But you bring it to a local level, and then you're still looking at a democratic process of 51% rule. Um, leaving the 49% uh, questioning those three pillars. I don't like that option because 51% in my parish who live in, say Alexandria, can make a decision about property and landowners outside in rural Rapides Parish. You understand what I'm saying? That will have profound implications if we happen to be the 49% who opposes it. Therefore, the, the parish wants it, and so we get carbon capture and sequestration.
And
I
Gary,
don't like that.
you brought something out at the recent We the People meeting a week or two ago in Homa, which is regardless of even if you are able to ban it from your parish, if the parish next door does it and there's some big problem with it, there's nothing to say that the carbon underground is not going to shift. There's nothing to say that the plume overground, should there be one, God forbid, come into your parish. There's nothing stopping this carbon dioxide, this pressurized carbon dioxide, from terrorizing
No,
people, whether they whether they vote for it or vote against it.
that's right, Daniel. You're absolutely correct. And that is why selfishly I got involved. It's because of the dependence on the Chico aquifer. Uh, 48%, as we've said over and over, of Louisiana, that's its source of drinking water. Farms, businesses, we use the Chico aquifer uh, for our enterprise. Uh, to destroy that Chico aquifer, whether you're in Vernon Parish approving it, Rapides Parish approving it, it's not justification when you put it at risk for the other parishes
Yeah.
Such a
and the other
great point.
property owners.
Such a great
That
point.
that justification does not exist because it falls short of those three pillars: life, liberty, and property.
That's
And
such a great
you know,
point.
we elect our representatives to honor that and protect the minority. And when I say I'm talking about the minority in that we should not, and I've said it many times, we should not rule in a total democracy because we live in a republic, a constitutional republic, where, I say this jokingly, where uh, two wolves and a lamb are voting for what's for dinner.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
Yeah,
but but Chris,
that's
in
a
the
great way to
republic,
put it. I love it.
the lamb is armed. And I'm not talking about Second Amendment arm. He is armed with a constitutional protection that the two wolves have. The two
Yes.
wolves can't decide what's that the lamb's for lunch.
Yes. That's such a great analogy,
Yeah.
Gary, to you.
And
And
Gary,
that's my concern with this local option, kicking it to the
yeah.
police chiefs. Now they're beholden to their constituents, but is everyone invested in this in this understanding as I am? And that's why Save My Louisiana was formed, is to educate, empower, and protect. And we're making headway, but there's still a
What an
lot of people in
organization
Louisiana
it has
that
become.
doesn't have
What
an
an
understanding.
organization it has become, Gary. What an organization Save My Louisiana has become.
And before we let you go, Gary, there's a great question in the chat from James. He says, "Who benefits from CCS?" In my view, and I'd love for you to correct me or fill in any gaps. Uh, the Europeans benefit from carbon capture and sequestration because they are the ones that are limiting American energy dominance by putting those ESG demands on our liquefied natural gas. I think it's the Europeans. I think it's the big bankers who trade in carbon credits.
Right? That's
And
right.
then it's every company whose hands touch this, whether it's a company that's building the pipelines or a company that's doing like an oil and gas company or any other kind of company that's dealing in this. There's cash flowing there. So to me, those are the ones that are benefiting. I think probably there's some politicians who are benefiting through campaign donations and hopefully not other kinds of gifts, but we see corruption is pretty rife. Is there anybody else that you would say is benefiting from this?
Um, I would say I would hate to say it. I would hate to say politicians, um, but uh, there are many right now who are against these these bills, these CCS bills, and when you see somebody like Cameron Henry and Olivier come out and say parishes, if you don't want the CCS, that's fine, but don't come to the state asking for money to build roads and bridges.
Despicable.
It is
Um,
Despicable, isn't
despicable.
it?
what is your benefit in that, Mr. President, Speaker? Why would you um, hold the parishes in in hostage to your demands
Yeah.
by withholding funds?
Yeah.
I don't understand that type of evil. I don't.
I don't either,
I mean,
Gary.
that's not politics. That's
Despicable.
just that's just evil to me,
It
and
is.
I don't understand that.
Well, all
So here
five
we
of us,
so
Gary, well,
yeah,
all
in
five
the
of us
end,
will have to go. All five
yeah,
of us are going to have to go. Just so you'll know, Cameron Henry said that, he's not going to allow five people in the state of
five people.
Louisiana who oppose carbon and capture and sequestration to stop the transformation of our state. Well, I don't know what world Cameron Henry lives in. I don't know what rock he sleeps under every night. But if
Mhm.
he thinks there's only five people in this state who oppose this lunacy, then maybe he needs to seek employment elsewhere because he has no pulse on the state of Louisiana right now or the sentiment. And I would tell him that straight to his face. You
Well,
have no clue what's going on.
and he will find
No.
out on Tuesday, will he not? I think people are going to be showing up in droves at the
You think
Capitol
all
for
five
this
will be
hearing.
there,
I
Danielle? You
think
think all
I
five will
think
Yeah,
be
all
all
there?
five.
five will be there, and he will be surprised at how five looks a lot more in person than it does when he can say that in a friendly crowd. I'll say we are encouraging people. Please show up to the Capitol. This hearing is scheduled, I believe, for 9 o'clock. I'm not sure 9:30 on Monday, and we want to make sure that people are out there in force. And if you are willing to testify, get ready and testify. Just let the legislature know. Let the committee, what is it, House Committee on Natural Resources and Environment, let them know that it's not their right to give away your property, and they better do the right thing and give it back.
Yeah, Danielle, double check. I think it's been moved to the 31st. But
Isn't
we need to
isn't
double
the
check that.
31st Tuesday?
As Tuesday, you said Monday.
Oh, I mean Tuesday. I'm sorry. Thanks for correcting me, Gary. I
Yeah,
meant
Okay.
I made
Tuesday.
the
Yeah.
same mistake the other day. I said Monday the 31st, and I was corrected as well. Before you go, Gary, I wanted to mention that Chuck Owen, we both spoke at a lunch here in Baton Rouge a week or so ago, and he was asked what he thought the likelihood was of it getting through, of HB7 getting through, and he said about 50-50. And he wasn't talking about passage on the House floor. He was talking about committee. And I find it absolutely stunning, stunning in light of the overwhelming sentiment against this madness that it would even be questionable about whether or not this bill would fly through a House Natural Resources Committee. It's staggering to me.
It is. It is. It's so much is. I just I'm simple. I'm simple minded. I'm not by no means versed in the law. Not an attorney. Not a scientist. But I don't understand. Chris, help me understand this. Why couldn't the Attorney General Liz Murrill come out and give her opinion on the direction of the legislature and these bills as a constitutionally? Is this
Yeah,
something that she can do, or
of
just
course.
just
Of course she
refuses to
can.
do?
Yeah,
Yeah,
as a matter of policy, because we made a request for an advisory opinion on the constitutionality of our voting system a year or two ago, Gary, and the response we got from the Attorney General's office was that they do not issue advisory opinions on matters that are either in litigation or reasonably anticipated to lead to litigation. And my response was that seems so utterly counterintuitive and downright illogical. If there's a matter that could lead to a formal lawsuit or formal litigation, and would require the expenditure of taxpayer dollars, either in on the plaintiff side or on the defense side, the exhaustion of judicial resources, and that lawsuit can be prevented by way of an advisory opinion from the attorney general that clarifies the issue. Why would you not issue an advisory opinion? It doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely.
So it's not there. There's nothing stopping the attorney general from issuing an advisory opinion on anything except their own policy. And frankly, I don't understand the policy. And I think Liz Muriel is a good attorney general. I think she's done a lot of good things. I just don't understand that policy preference of theirs.
And that's my simple mindedness with the resource of the Louisiana taxpayers. Uh, we already have a ruling, a Supreme Court ruling, that is very clear on eminent domain, and yet we still have legislation coming out of both houses that are either uh, uh, adhering to the structure that the Supreme Court laid out, attacking eminent domain, and there's other legislation that's still promoting the entire build out for CCS.
For
So,
CCS.
yes, you would think that our Attorney General could help save the taxpayers some money and educate our representatives. But I guess that's the separations of powers. Uh, I know that's just my feudal mind thinking.
Gary, your feudal mind is filled with a lot of common sense, and and logical thinking here, and it's exactly correct. We just get a Louisiana Supreme Court decision that essentially eviscerates the whole statutory scheme for carbon capture and sequestration as it relates to eminent domain. We have the EPA that has totally reversed the Obama era finding that CO2 is a danger to our health or a danger to the environment. And you have, in that context, you have all of this legislation that we're about to have to go through. The entire legislative process is going to be consumed 60% with this CCS legislation, which is a tremendous exhaustion of state resources. If there was ever a time when the Attorney General should issue an opinion about whether or not A, eminent domain is constitutional, or B, whether or not it's even constitutional in this scenario for 51% of the people in a local parish to overrule the core constitutional rights of 49, the tyranny of the majority. It would be great for her to come in and weigh in on this and issue an opinion. Why not do it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think in my mind, it's the tyranny of the urgent that supersedes any common sense.
And the
Yep.
urgent is cash. I mean, if we're going to put it in plain terms.
The
Yeah.
cash is exactly right.
Yeah.
But Gary, I'm telling you, very significant victories. And I think I've told Danielle this. I love the fact that LeCag and the State of Freedom get to fight and battle and win with Save My Louisiana, because I know you've been there, Danielle, others have been there as well, where you think you have a friend and you think you have someone who's loyal, and you turn around and they're nowhere to be found. When I'm dealing with Save My Louisiana, I never have to worry about turning around and wondering if you're still going to be there. So God bless you, sir. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Chris. Daniel, it's been such a privilege to get to meet you guys and know you and work beside you. And thank you so much for what you do.
Well, thank you, Gary. Right back at you. You have a wonderful day, and I know you will be seeing Chris on Tuesday. I probably won't be there, but you'll be seeing a lot of friendly faces.
Absolutely. Can't wait.
Awesome. Take care.
Bye.
I love what he's doing, Chris. I just love, whenever he came to Homa, Gary was talking about the fact that he was not a political advocate or activist in any way, shape, or form before they started coming for his property, before he started understanding the treachery of what was happening with carbon capture and sequestration. And I think it's a fantastic story, because all of us had, a trigger that happened in our lives that made us wake up and say, if you don't get into this fight, As who is it that says you are the cavalry?
Cavalry,
It's the other one.
cavalry.
Cavalry. You are the cavalry. No one's coming for you. You have to save yourself. Of course, we have prayer. Of course, but we have to be involved. And I think that Gary and Colonel Guillory and their whole team, I mean, the group that has amassed behind this issue is fantastic, and they are fierce. And so I look forward to seeing how many people show up. I hope that there's an overflow room or two overflow flow rooms needed to hold back all five of us, Chris.
Danielle, I'm. Why don't can you call two of the people in Louisiana who oppose carbon capture and sequestration, and I'll call the other two, and see if maybe. Well, I'll call three, you call two, and so maybe all five of them can be present at the Capitol. And if it's possible, and look, I don't know how things work down there, but maybe I can introduce Cameron Henry to the five anti-CCS citizens in Louisiana that he referenced in his recent talk.
Yeah, he's going to find out the numbers vastly outstrip five,
Can
vastly
I say
outstrip
one
single
last thing,
digits. All
Danielle?
right,
I want to say
just
one
this
last.
time.
I got to say one last thing about this because for the reasons that Gary mentioned and that you always so preciously mention, carbon capture sequestration does not exist in a vacuum. It's not like I'm sitting in my house and I'm exposing myself to something in my house that is harmful to me but has no effect on you. In
Right.
that case, the Constitution says the government has absolutely no legitimate interest in involving itself in that situation. People are free to engage in activities that harm only themselves or that harm only their property, but they're not free to engage in activities that have the direct or indirect result of harming another person or another person's property or another person's family. They can't do that. And that's exactly why ending eminent domain does not end the issue. This is not going to end until carbon capture, the 45Q tax credits for carbon capture and sequestration are repealed at the federal level. Once our money goes away, this whole racket goes away. But until that happens, we can't rest. And we have to remember that carbon capture and sequestration migrates underground, Danielle, and it affects people even who have not consented to it.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Chris. And I would say that the 45Q tax credits are not the only thing that need to be crushed to kill this. I believe that President Trump either needs to put a very heavy hand on the Europeans who are pushing this ESG mandates that are forcing corporations to have carbon capture credits, or the Europeans need their find out moment of realizing that they're not going to be able to access any of our LNG if they make those demands, right? Like the street goes both ways, Europe.
It really does. And I think Marco Rubio, Danielle, I think did draw a line in the sand a number of months ago, talking about how our regulatory policies are not going to be dictated to by foreign interests. And I think he was talking specifically about some of the climate change madness. But you're right, President Trump needs to speak out loud and clear.
Yeah, and I believe he will. I believe he will. I think it's all connected to the ongoing conflict that we see right now. So we'll see how it turns out because he's been shining a bright light on particularly the UK, and we'll see, whether they wake up and start acting right or if they just continue down their path of insanity.
Exactly.
Chris, I would be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity, but I think the carbon capture and sequestration issue and the constitutional perspective on that is so parallel to the fluoride in water issue, where the government is pushing something on us, literally pushing it into our houses, forcing us to pay for it, and poisoning us all at the same time. So, look, I am making a huge push. LACAG is making a huge push to get the fluoride out of the water. We're going to be asking that the legislature repeal the amendment that was put on Senator Facey's Senate Bill 4, which would prohibit fluoride being put into the water systems. And you know what? This is a free society. If you want to poison yourself, you're welcome to, but we're not going to pay. We're not going to continue to pay to be poisoned. So please, if you haven't watched yesterday's my interview yesterday with Dr. Rich Ulrey, he is probably the foremost expert on the impact of minerals on the human body. And I've done 3 interviews with him now. They're all fascinating. He has incredible keys to health in there. But yesterday in particular, he talked quite a bit about the harm of fluoride on our biology. We're going to be putting out a few reels on that. Some of them might already be out. So anyway, I just want to put a plug in for that because this is one of the things that's got my hackles up very big this session, and I want to see it fixed.
Yes. And Danielle, the legislation before it was amended statutorily would have taken the fluoride out of the water and would have required 15% of the registered voters in a parish. In the case of Terrebonne, it would be about 9,000 voters to vote, to sign a petition to put it on a parish-wide ballot, whether they want to put this back in the water. That's the way it would have. But the presumption would have been in favor of it not being in the water. When this bill was amended, the reverse, that was flipped on its head. Now it's in the water, and you need 9,000 voters to trigger a parish-wide vote. Obviously, we'd much prefer it the way it was originally. But when you really put it in constitutional terms, Danielle, the minority should not be subject to a majority vote if the result of that is to directly harm the minority. That's why we don't live in a pure democracy. Maybe fluoride in the water should just be outright declared illegal because of the evidence of its harm.
Yeah. 100%. I think it should. I think the evidence is overwhelming, and anyone who is interested in the evidence, Dr. Ulrey has sent me what I believe is a document containing over 100 studies of the ill effects of fluoride on the human body. So I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any question anymore. So anyway,
we've suggested that to Senator Facey that he park his bill, because if his bill passes in current form, it's likely to be even more difficult to get the fluoride out of the water than if the bill just dies right now.
Yeah, agreed. James is asking, what about a statewide referendum on CCS? Chris and I have probably differing views on this.
Well, I'll tell you. Yeah, you want it? I'll tell you my view on it.
Go for it.
I think a statewide referendum on CCS, where it goes directly to the people, would certainly be better than imposing it statutorily on the people. At least in that situation, people would be able to vote directly. But we're still in a situation where 51% of the state vote for carbon capture and sequestration, then it is imposed upon the 49% with damage to their families, damage to their property, and infringement of their core health, property, and liberty interests. And again, that's why we don't live in a pure democracy. We live in a constitutional republic, and there are certain fundamental core rights that cannot be violated. I don't care if 359,964,801 people in America vote for something and there's only one person who doesn't want it. They do not have the right to violate core constitutional liberties of that one person. And that's why it's important to remember that. So to answer James's question, a statewide referendum would be much better than what we have now. But I believe that carbon capture and sequestration on its face should be declared illegal in the state of Louisiana as a violation of core liberty interests, core property rights, and health interests.
No, that's a great point, Chris. And the only thing I'd add to it is I'm not for any statewide referendums or any elections until our election system is fixed.
And I know that that's always going to be the circle back, Danielle. And I'm starting to agree with you more and more. And I cannot wait, by the way, until Tuesday. Everybody has got to listen on Tuesday because we have a series of clips from a recent hearing in which Nancy Landry appeared, in which it is impossible to look at these clips and come to the conclusion that she really knows what she's doing. It was in response to questioning from both Democrat and Republican members of the House Governmental Affairs Committee. And I just couldn't believe what I was hearing, Danielle. And it's all clipped, and we're going to go through it one by one. Y'all have to watch Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Chris, we've been streaming for an hour and we have not talked about any of our other bills.
Let's go.
So
Rock.
we're going to have to move and stop camping out so much.
Move quick.
Yeah.
But people love listening to us, so I'm not overly worried about it.
Well, I don't want to be here all day. I love everybody. I don't
But I
want to
love
be here all
being
day.
with you, though.
I know.
Okay.
I know. All right, we're going to move along. All right, House Bill 595. This is continuing on kind of the carbon capture and sequestration energy type of theme, and HB 595 is by Rep. Jacob Landry. And Chris, this is a very, very sinister, concerning bill. Whenever we just read the headline, we were like, they are trying to do something here that we are not going to like. It has not been heard yet. It's only been referred to House Natural Resources. I don't have any line of sight as to when it will be heard, but would you talk about it?
The bill takes any and all control away from local governments, the local people, when it comes to any issue related to natural resources, carbon capture and sequestration, at least in its original impetus. The spirit for it was climate change, so clearly the issue would fall under the rubric of House of Natural Resources in the state. This bill puts all the permitting power, all the regulatory power squarely in the hands of the state, and the problem is that it could divest, it could nullify or make of no effect any of the local carbon capture sequestration that is pending if it's passed and signed by the governor. This bill would nullify that local authority. This bill doesn't mention carbon capture and sequestration specifically, but I view it, and unless Jacob Landry explains it otherwise, I view it as a backdoor mechanism to undercut, to cut the knees out from under local governments who decide they do not want this in their parish. That's what I believe is going on here. I can't think of any other reason why he would be bringing this.
Yeah, if you want to look at best case scenario, I think this may be a bill that would perhaps aim to reduce red tape and make the processes move a little quicker. I think if he wants to fix this and prove his point, if that's the tack he wants to take, is reducing bureaucratic red tape and steps for companies that are trying to do genuine investment, then there should just be some measures to align the local permitting process with the state permitting process, because the localities have every right to require a permit.
You better believe it. It's called the principle of subsidiarity, and any issue that can be decided most locally, that's where it should be decided, not the state of Louisiana. Incidentally, Danielle, if that is Jacob Landry's reason to reduce bureaucratic red tape, I've just got a couple of suggestions for him. Maybe he could light a fuse under the Louisiana Department of Government Efficiency, so they could actually do a deep forensic dive into all the waste in our government, and maybe they could start by taking a close look at the 497 boards and commissions that exist in Louisiana, many of which do completely duplicative services and waste one heck of a lot of our money. So there are certainly ways to reduce red tape and regulatory burdens, but I'm not sure that this bill is designed to do that. I think it's more sinister than that.
Yeah, I think it's more sinister as well, but if he, that seems like a good off ramp if he doesn't want to be outed too badly. All
Yeah.
right. How about Chris, Senate Bill 200 by Senator Valerie Hodges. This passed the Senate unanimously, and I felt, Chris, it seemed like from last year to this year, it's like the Senate must have had a lobotomy.
Yes, exactly. This year they had a lobotomy. Last year they had a bottle in front of me, and there's a big difference between the two schemes
That-
there. So We were down there. We could have testified. The bill had absolutely no problem in committee. There was some concern by a couple of people who testified, Danielle, a couple of Chinese guys, that the bill would indirectly harm them and perhaps result in the expropriation of their property just because they're citizens of China. But the bill actually does lay out very specific steps that the state military department would have to go through in order to expropriate land. And it has to be 50 miles of a military installation, and it has to be owned or controlled by either a foreign government adversary or an agent of a foreign government adversary. So I don't believe that citizens of other nations, whether they be foreign adversary nations or not, have much to worry about under this bill. It's a good bill, and as we said before, Danielle, it fills in a very, very important gap in our security posture here in Louisiana. So very happy, and we're keeping a close eye on it.
Yeah, and I have such great respect for Senator Hodges. I just have to look at this with a little bit of irony, Chris, because look at the care that Senator Hodges has taken to make sure that citizens of foreign countries and citizens of foreign adversarial countries don't have their land expropriated unjustly. Meanwhile, if you live in a carbon capture sequestration area or a place that's right for that, a private company can take your land any day of the week. So
Exactly.
it's time to rectify that.
That is such a great point, Danielle. And you made this point last year when Greg Miller killed this bill because of his purported concern that innocent citizens of other countries would be swept into it, which they would not have been, by the way, because we looked at the bill. That was just an excuse. And you came on, and the rant was classic when you compared Greg Miller's concern for potential agents of foreign enemy governments and their land rights in our state, but has absolutely no regard for second and third and fourth generation Louisiana citizens who simply don't want their land to be stolen for a scam. I loved your analogy on that point.
Well, it still stands. It still absolutely stands until they prove me wrong, right? Okay, moving on to some bills that are related to elections and voting. The first one is House Bill 400. Chris, I can't recall if we mentioned this before. There's a number, I think we may have. There's a number of bills that are attempting to do the same thing. I'm not exactly sure why there's so much duplication, and I think they're all kind of running at the same pace. They look very, very similar, so I'm not sure. But this is Brian Fontenot's bill that would make sure that bond and tax elections are held on the same day as other regularly scheduled elections, so people show up and say that they don't need their taxes raised.
Yes, it's a good bill, Danielle, for a couple of reasons. Basically, what the bill does says, look, if a local government authority wants to raise local taxes, right now they can do it in the spring or in the fall. They can do it in the spring in independent freestanding elections when the local taxpayer funds the whole thing. And they can also do it in the fall when there are other statewide, much bigger races on the ballot. This bill would say you can only do it once a year, and you can only do it when there is another statewide race on the ballot, whether it's a congressional race or a governor's race. That's when you can do it. The reason why this is a good bill is that, first of all, it cuts by 50% cuts down the opportunities that a local government has to go put on the ballot a tax increase, which is always good, the fewer opportunities they have to do that. And secondly, the local governments only have to pay a small percentage of those costs if there's a statewide election on the ballot. The Secretary of State picks the cost up, or at least most of it. So it's fiscally a good bill because it saves local taxpayers money, and it's good because it reduces the opportunity for local government to raise taxes. And also, this point, Danielle, usually in these in these elections where there's only one or two things on the ballot, a tax or a bond issue locally, very few people show up to vote.
That's right.
And so it's a very few people, a very small percentage of people that are going to vote. and usually they're voting to raise, taxes on local citizens. But if much more people are going to vote, and they will be if there's a statewide election on the ballot, it'll be a much more representative sample of the voters, and I think probably a greater likelihood that a tax increase would be voted down. But I like his bill. I like
Yeah,
it.
I like it too. I would argue that there's very little chance that even the few people that show up are voting to raise their own taxes. I think, you know,
Well,
we
maybe
have
they wouldn't know. Danielle, sometimes, to be honest with you, this ballot this
the
ballot
language.
language can be
Yeah,
so confusing
it's true.
that people don't have any idea what they're doing. I've gone in to vote and read something that, like, wow, how could anybody not vote for this? And then you got to take a look at what the enabling legislation says, and it's terrible. It's horrible. So who knows? But
Yep.
I know that I like this legislation for the reasons that I named.
Yep. And it was scheduled for floor debate on the House floor yesterday, but it was returned to the calendar, so it may run today. We'll keep an eye on it for y'all. And Chris, the next one is House Bill 842. I think this one got returned to the calendar yesterday. It was meant for a House floor vote. It did not get picked up. So it's still, I mean, it's still in play, but this is Boyer's election code
Yeah.
revision bill that we have a lot of problems with.
Yeah, this is the bill that essentially puts uh, nearly unchecked authority in the entire process of procurement of a computer-based voting system, and the handling and the maintenance and the warehousing of that system once purchased. Almost complete and total unchecked power in the Secretary of State. No public bidding, no transparency, and of course, it's all by Nancy Landry's design. This only passed out of the House Governmental Affairs Committee 8-5, and a good part of it, Danielle, is at least in committee. In original form, the bill allowed the Secretary of State herself to contest an election. It wasn't up to a candidate. It wasn't up to a citizen. The public official, the Secretary of State, had grounds to contest an election, which is unheard of. And even the House Governmental Affairs Committee concluded that that's ridiculous. And so they took that out. So that's been amended out of the bill. So finally, we have found something that the oversight committees in our state legislature disagree with the Secretary of State on, and that is that she, as a public official, does not have individual standing to challenge an election. So thank God for that. We found one. We found one.
But did it get taken out?
I believe it did. My understanding is that that was amended out of it. At least it was supposed to be.
All right. Well, we'll see. We need to take a closer look at that one.
We'll take a closer look, but it's utter lunacy. But the bottom line is this, Danielle. This we got to make a good push against this on the House floor and then over on the Senate side.
Yeah. Okay. The next one is one that I know you are very passionate about, Chris. This is SB 49 by Senator Alan Seabaugh, removing Bessie from the list of party primary elections, and it passed the Senate and Governmental Affairs without objection, although I think there was some great hesitation to vote for it. And then it passed the Senate 35-0, Chris. So I guess they're
Yeah.
all in agreement about how they're going to handle this one.
Yeah, because they don't know what they're doing and don't know what they're voting on, and you know, we have to make sure that the House understands, and we have to make sure that our listeners understand exactly what this does. It's terrible because it would revert back to the jungle primary system, Danielle, where Democrats get to vote anywhere they want in our primaries. For a Bessie election, we have 8 Bessie seats coming up in 2027. These people will govern. This is the most powerful education board in Louisiana. They will govern the formation of our students for years and years to come. It is critically important that the people who serve on that board are constitutional conservatives who understand the threats that our students face in their curriculum, in their schools, and guard against it. Well, Senator Seabaugh wants to go back to a jungle primary instead of a closed primary where only Republicans get to vote in it. So Democrats get to come in and once again make sure that rhinos and leftists get elected to our Bessie board. And I think it's absolutely atrocious in light of how hard we worked to get a closed primary system here in Louisiana. And the reason why he's doing this, he says, is because we're going to save $5 million. We don't just want to have one freestanding closed primary election when the other races are going to be still in the jungle primary system. That's just too expensive just for one race. Let's let the Bessie board be in the jungle primary, and then we'll come back later and we'll pass new legislation and put all the offices back in the closed primary system. It is that is never going to happen. The president of the Senate is already saying he wants to move away from the closed primary system altogether. But secondly, the reason why we're in the situation right now of having a freestanding closed primary only for one race is because our legislature in 2024 exempted itself and exempted the governor's office in the original legislation from being included in closed primaries because they didn't want them imposed on them because we have too many rhinos who apparently like their political longevity. So the reason why we're in the position we're in right now, or at least he's in, where we have to save this $5 million and we have an independent Bessie election, we wouldn't be in this situation if they had done their job in 2024. That's the bottom line.
That is the bottom line. And hey, if Representative Fontenot's bill passes, with that, I bet he saves about $5 million with those local elections getting moved to a single time frame. So there you go,
Amen.
folks.
There
Problem
you go.
solved.
Hey, I think we just solved it. So we're gonna start pinching pennies now in our state when it comes to the board and the character of the most powerful education board in Louisiana that should be elected by conservative Republicans instead of being influenced by Democrats. That's the board where you're going to come in the election, where you're going to come in and try to save the state money. I think it's blatantly disingenuous.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to legislative authority, governmental authority as a theme. The first bill in that lineup is House Bill 705. I know this one's near and dear to your heart, Chris, by Representative Candace Newell. Did you testify on this one, by the way?
I did, and
Okay.
I did and I was trying to figure out whether there was an epidemic of citizens showing demonstrable contempt for the legislature during the legislative session. I've never seen it. I've seen passionate advocacy. I've seen people stand up for their rights and vigorously exercise their right to free speech. But I've never seen a citizen be very, very rarely be disrespectful or in any way disruptive during a legislative session. So I was wondering why this bill was being brought. But it's a bill it's contempt of the legislature, and it would criminalize any disruptive or boisterous or disorderly conduct in the legislature with a $50,000 penalty.
Are you serious?
Per incident? $50,000 penalty. Who do you think that legislation, fortunately, it's dead on arrival. It's dead as a doornail because people raised some hell about this. But who do you think that legislation quite likely is directed toward, Danielle?
I bet it's not the CCS lobbyists, Chris.
I bet it's not the guys going in there promoting carbon capture and sequestration on Louisiana. I guarantee you that. And so it's directed toward Louisiana citizens who speak passionately and vocally about their constitutional rights, well within their rights, always respectfully, always civilly, but passionately. She wants apparently to protect the legislature against that type of contempt of the citizenry. The reason why this is so obnoxious, Danielle, is that the bill would protect the government and the legislature against the voice of the citizens when we're the ones who need to be protected from them.
No
Okay?
kidding.
We need to be protected from you, not the other way around. You need to retitle your legislation Contempt of the Citizens and impose a series of restrictions on what the legislature and our government can and cannot do because they violate our core rights. Then I would come down there and testify in favor. You haven't flipped the wrong way, Candace.
That is, I can't believe $50,000. She just as soon have the funds directly wired into her account at that point, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Extraordinary.
It's very crazy. All right, now House Bill 752, another bill related to elections. This is Kyle Green, and it is his proposed constitutional amendment that would make some changes to the way the legislative session runs.
Yeah. Danielle, we're opposed to this bill for a very simple reason. Right now, leading up to a session, there's a pre-file deadline, and usually it's 10 days before a session starts is the deadline to pre-file legislation. Okay, you can't do it after that. So at least you and I know that within 10 days of a session, we're going to have an opportunity to go through every piece of legislation and be able to analyze it and look at it without having to go back and look and see if there's a new data dump every day. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's why it's very important. And once the pre-file deadline is passed, the session starts. Each legislature gets, I think, 5 items of legislation that they can file during the session. But there's a deadline even then. Once 23 days of the session passes, they can't file anything else. So outside limit, we know that 23 days into a legislative session, we don't have to worry about anything at all being filed again. And we can focus the rest of the session on, by the way, are we 23 days into the session right now, Danielle?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, so I guess we need to continue to be checking to see if people are filing new things. Probably not, but they could be. But once 23 days of this session passes, you and I know there's no possibility anything new can be filed at that point. What this bill does, if this constitutional amendment passes, it completely eviscerates the pretrial filing deadline, the deadline once you get into a session, and basically says you can file legislation anytime you want to, anytime during a session. Imagine that, Danielle, halfway or 2/3 through a legislative session, there's a 100 or 200 bill data dump on us that we get to go scrutinize and look at while we're also trying to hold the fort down and manage the legislation that's already pending. I don't want this. There's no reason for this. They need to get their ducks in a row, get their bills filed. What would be the reason, Danielle, why a legislator would want to pass a bill that lets them file legislation anytime during a session? What would be the reason for this?
Well, I think the most innocuous reason is just they don't have their ducks in a row, so they want to be able to come back and do something should they get approached with a good idea. I think the worst case scenario is that, look, we know that the lobbying firms, the big lobbying firms and the big 501c4s have massive money and a lot of staff, and they can handle this kind of dump. Small groups like ours cannot, period.
That's true. Very true. And because of that, now you and I are the type of people and others who wouldn't sleep for 5 days
Right.
just to make sure that we were able to look at everything as closely as we possibly could, which
And
would
then
be a
we
good
might
thing.
need the contempt of legislature, Bill.
I know I might need the contempt of the legislature, and exactly. But the bottom line is we shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to do that. They should have their ducks in a row, and they should be able to handle. They're already allowed to file 5 bills after the session starts. They just have to get it filed before 23 days into the session. The current restraints are 100% reasonable. The bill would also allow them to move the start date of the session, the end date of the session. It would allow them, anyway, the long and the short of it is there's no reason for any of this.
Yeah.
And the net effect is that it vests more power in the government and divests the citizens of more power.
Yeah.
That's what happens here.
And look, the people who wrote the Louisiana State Constitution did this for a reason, and it's predictability for the citizens. It's also predictability for the legislature because people, this is a part-time job, right? This is not a full-time legislature. If it's a full-time legislature, you know that you have your life dedicated to bringing legislation. If you have 3 months out of the year where you have to be away from your family, you kind of need to put parameters on that. If you have a boss, if you have a business, if you need to take care of childcare or whatever else. So I think the predictability is part of the system because we're a part-time legislature, and I think that's just respectful for everybody that's involved.
Very, very well said. And when I was testifying on this, by the way, I testified against this. I said, this is a constitutional protection for the citizens so that we truly can enjoy transparency in our government and know what our government's doing. I said, but you know who it also helps? It also helps you.
Yeah.
You're chaotically busy down here during the session. Do you want to have to go look at 200 items of legislation or 300 items of legislation? Oh, 2/3 of the way through a legislative session that people are trying to rush through these chambers?
Right.
I don't think so. This is a benefit for all of us. Danielle, the bottom line is the system is perfectly fine as it is now. It doesn't need to be changed.
That's right. Well, it's not perfectly fine, but we like what we have better than what he wants to give us. How's that?
In structure,
Yeah.
it is fine. They're not really implementing it faithfully.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And good morning, Jacques. He says the best is yet to come. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. We're gonna not be so salty, Jacques.
What's up, Jock? The best is yet to come, Jock. By the way, I want you to know that I am always brimming with optimism here, Jock, and I truly do believe that hope springs eternal. I'm a very optimistic person, but there are times when, to be honest with you, you just gotta call them out. You know that.
Yeah. 100%. Okay, Senate Bill 123, Chris, by Senator Jay Morris. This is his proposed constitutional amendment to allow the governor to recommend the suspension or removal of a district attorney and certain judges, quote unquote, under certain circumstances. You and I had major problems with this after speaking with Jeff Wittenbrink, who came on to our last Warrior Wednesday and kind of outlined his perspective on this, which we thought was very much aligned with the Constitution. And this did see, fortunately, some pretty major amendments in committee.
Yeah, Danielle, you and I's position in the beginning when we first looked at this was we were focused on the fact that it appears to be a systemic problem, unfortunately, that many DAs and many judges are not faithfully enforcing the law. They're really not vigorously prosecuting even some of the worst criminals in some places. In many places they are, but in certain places they're not. So what do you do about that? So this legislation is a constitutional amendment, right, Danielle?
Yeah.
It's a constitutional amendment, and listeners, get this, that would allow the governor to recommend the removal, okay, take any DA, locally elected DA, locally elected judge in the state. The governor would be able to recommend to the state Senate that DA or that judge be suspended for either malfeasance or incompetence, very, very broad terms that you could probably drive a Mack truck through. So the bottom line is the governor could concoct or manufacture any reason he wanted to remove a local DA or a local judge. He would send that recommendation to the state Senate, and the state Senate would immediately would vote on whether or not to suspend. And it would have to be a 2/3 vote in the Senate. And if they voted 2/3 to affirm the governor's recommendation, that DA or that judge is gone, and up to a 6-month period. During that 6-month period, the Senate would decide whether or not they're going to have a full hearing on the evidence, on the merits of what this judge or DA supposedly did wrong. And if they decide they're going to have a hearing on it, then they vote. One person makes a motion to affirm, and then they go on and they have their evidentiary hearing where all the evidence comes in. Once all the evidence is heard, they have a vote. They vote on whether or not that DA or judge should be formally, permanently removed. And if 2/3 of the Senate say yes, he's permanently removed from office. I think this is a recipe for corruption. Uh, you know why we can't support this, Danielle? We can't support this because our state Senate, unfortunately, doesn't have any backbone. At least they don't if they have a backbone consistently, they conceal it quite well. And I do not see the state Senate standing up and actually viewing the evidence against someone the governor wants to get rid of in an objective way and voting against his interests. And so this bill, fortunately, we fought against this bill, and it's now been amended, Danielle, in a very significant way.
Yeah.
Now the state Senate just goes through its ordinary impeachment process. There's a mechanism set up to remove DAs and judges. They initiate it. That's already in place in the law. And then the governor, once they make a decision, the governor, signs off on it, Danielle? But he's at the end of the process, not the beginning. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, but I still have some big problems with this, and I think it needs to get flushed down the toilet. And I'll tell you why. It's a separation of powers problem. The governor has no business in the judiciary, period. I'll say also, just because the governor has been moved to the end of the process doesn't mean he doesn't initiate the process through back channels. He should have no say in this process, period. If the governor was interested in this kind of mechanism, first of all, the legislature already has it, and wanted to be smart about this, he would just keep real quiet and still go use the back channels and still get the person impeached and never have his fingerprints on it. So I don't understand why there's such a move by the legislature to defer their power to the governor on every single step they possibly can. But I can tell you that the legislature is very beat down by the governor. We have heard it from people. We know it's true. There are people who won't bring certain kinds of legislation, not because they don't believe in it, but because they're tired of being beaten down. They're tired of the bullying. They're tired of the repercussions of crossing the governor because they are, I believe, swift and heavy-handed. So I do want to give the legislature some grace, because what we have heard about the way that this governor operates, and let's be frank about it, every single governor before them that probably during my lifetime has operated the same exact way. I don't know if there's some kind of demonizing spirit in the governor's mansion that puts this spirit of control on governors in the state so heavily, but it is insane that the governor would want to wield this kind of control. I think we need to be praying for the governor. We need to be praying for the legislature that sanity would prevail, that a heart for the people would prevail, because this kind of nonsense of wanting to assert maximum control over every process in the state is insane. And it's demonic.
And it's demonic. Danielle, you're exactly right. We've heard directly from legislators, and obviously we would never betray the confidence of any legislator that we speak to. It will never happen. But we know with absolute authority that they feel beaten down. They feel like they're dealing with a belligerent governor, and a number of them are still dealing with the repercussions of opposing our governor last session, still dealing with the repercussions of acting on principle, doing what was right, and because he didn't like it or it violated his agenda, he's been engaging in some of the worst form of reprisal you can possibly imagine, including but not limited to defunding of critical infrastructure in their own parishes. And I think it's absolutely reprehensible. Reprehensible. That is the last person on earth who should be in any position of authority over anybody. The last person on earth who should have governing authority over anyone, who would use the weight of his office to punish citizens because he disagrees with a vote a legislator made on an issue that he was advancing. I can't think of anything more disqualifying, or I can't think of a virtue that is more essential to effective leadership than the virtue of not retaliating in those types of situations. And I would say that's a big part of the reason why our state is where we are, because of that type of belligerence. But if anybody ever tells you that our legislature is not beaten down and is not sick and tired of this bullying, they are lying to you. They are lying to you. We know on perfectly good authority that they are.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Next up was Senate Bill 97, Chris, also by Senator Jay Morris. This bill, let's see, this is a proposed constitutional amendment to require the prosecutor's consent for a defendant to waive his right to trial by jury. You have major problems with this on the grounds of the Constitution. It passed in a 26-11 party line vote, and just a note that Senators Blake Miguez and Sam Jenkins were absent.
Yeah, and you know, I know I have a feeling that Senator Miguez. By the way, I don't know if I told you this, Danielle, but Senator Miguez is using the LeCag logo in one of his commercials, and you know, like Blake, I think he's been pretty conservative in the legislature, but it would have been nice if we had been asked permission to do that, you know, but we weren't asked for permission. But bottom line is, I think
It's
that
the highest form of flattery, isn't it?
well, I guess it is, yeah. But anyway, Blake was absent for this. What it does, Danielle, the reason why it's so important, you know, in our country, every person accused of a crime in the original Constitution, it didn't matter what the crime was. The Constitution says that anyone accused of a crime is entitled to a jury. Any crime, it doesn't matter what it is. That's how important our founding fathers viewed the fundamental right to trial by jury, which, as you know, Thomas Jefferson said, is the last anchor and only hope of a free society is trial by jury. Okay, so that's the bottom line. So this constitutional amendment would require the state, the government, to agree if a defendant wants to waive his right to trial by jury. He doesn't require their permission to exercise the right and have a jury, but he has to get their permission to waive the right. Well, our position is this. If the Constitution said that he has a right to a trial by jury to protect against oppression from the government, a corrupt judge, a corrupt prosecutor, whoever, if he's not the only one who has the right to waive it, then it's not a right. It's not a right, okay? Danielle, if you have a right to go get in your car and drive down to the Walgreens, you also have a right not to, okay? And so I know it's a much more superficial level, but if the right to trial by jury is fundamental and vests only in a defendant, then the right to waive that should also vest only in him, or it's not a right, it's a privilege of the government. That's why this is a bad bill. The government has no legitimate constitutional interest in injecting itself into whether or not a criminal defendant waives a jury at trial or not. And there may be very legitimate reasons why a defendant may choose to waive a jury in certain complex cases or cases that are highly sensationalized, where maybe he thinks a judge could be more dispassionate and more rational in looking at the evidence and the facts. It's his right. And that is why I believe that if this does, you know, I believe that we're going to be able to get a lot of information out to people to make them understand why this is not a good bill. And hopefully it gets shot down if it gets through the whole process. You know, it just would be going before the people if it passes now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Were you
So
able
that's
to
my
testify
opinion.
on
And I
this
think
one?
it's a big issue. And I did testify on this. Some people don't think it's a big deal. I think it's a massively important deal
Yeah.
for freedom and due process and a bulwark against government tyranny.
Yeah, and unsurprisingly but disappointingly, it was on party line votes, and the Democrats, as we saw during the criminal session and have seen since then, have really lined up on the side of the Constitution when it comes to matters of criminal justice.
You know what? Absolutely right. And it's amazing how, you know, you find allies when you're loyal to the Constitution, sometimes you find unlikely allies.
That's right. Okay, now on to some issues related to business and economic development, and these bills are crazy. Basically, it's all about fees and the government wanting more of your money. House Bill 908 by Representative Sean Mena. And we may bring I think this is the one you wanted a video for, Chris. So we couldn't get it to work this morning, but we're going to bring it on Tuesday for sure. This bill passed unanimously, and it was a bill really brought by the Secretary of State to raise fees across the board in her office.
Yep. Everything you file in the Secretary of State's office, if this legislation gets through, will be increased. And it will result in a collective $5 million taken out of the private economy and going directly into the coffers of the Secretary of State because of these increased filing fees. Everything they do, Danielle, now is done electronically.
Yeah.
It's the press of a button. They're not doing anything that's any more difficult. What exactly does it cost the Secretary of State to electronically file some articles of organization or a trademark application or incorporation documents? It doesn't cost them anything. I'm trying to figure out why she justified this bill in order to keep up with the cost of inflation. It doesn't cost them anything. It's all done electronically. $5 million tax increase essentially on small business and startups in Louisiana because of these fee increases in the Secretary of State's office now.
Yeah.
And we're going to make sure that everybody knows about it, and we're going to make sure that people know exactly how Republicans voted on this, and they still have an opportunity on the House floor and even over on the Senate side to do something about this. But never ceases to amaze me, Danielle, and I think it's becoming slightly less. I can see it just a little bit. The resistance is building a little bit. You see it in little pockets here and there. But still, I've never seen a situation where an institution seems to be so reflexively obedient to the every whim of Queen Nancy.
Well, that's true. And Chris, on principle, as a matter of principle, I am in favor of a fee-based government, but they can't have it both ways. They can't say we are going to tax you until you can't see anymore, and then we're also going to add fees on top of it. I need the government to show me some act of good faith, some serious acts of good faith, that they are peeling away the tax burden before they start adding on new fees.
I love it. I love it. And you're so right. In other words, Danielle, it's a little bit disingenuous for them to come in and ask for a fee increase when we have the highest combined local and state sales tax rate in the country at almost 11%. That seems a bit disingenuous, doesn't it?
It's completely disingenuous. And what does this do for attracting businesses, for encouraging businesses? I'm not saying that $25 here and $15 there is going to make or break a person's decision to start a business in Louisiana, but I can tell you all of that other red tape and all of those other taxes and fees associated will. And I'll also say, I don't even understand why we have to file all that garbage to begin with. What do we get for it? We don't get anything for it. We get a nice little electronic sealed form that says, oh, congratulations, a certificate that says you have filed your business. Well, why do I have to pay for someone to do that? I can do it on Canva. It's retarded. It shouldn't, it should, I mean, if they can prove to me what we get out of that, then they can maybe consider talking to me about a fee increase. But I think the whole thing is a freaking racket.
Danielle, you're right, and you said that when we first started talking about this bill. It is amazing, 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 the extent to which what our founding fathers views as foundational natural rights that cannot be infringed have been distorted by our government into privileges that they have to grant to us. It's probably the most sordid and perverse transformation of our founding fathers' vision in world history. And they would look at these things and ask the exact same question that you just asked. Why does Danielle Walker have to come and get your permission to go fishing in a lake a few miles from her house?
Yeah.
Why do I have to get a permit or a license to go hunt on public land?
Thank
Why
you.
do I have to get your permission to do all these things, government? I think it's a great question to ask, Danielle, and you're right. And I mean that you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. Don't get me started on those hunting and fishing fees permits. I get
Yes.
real upset about that.
Whenever you start going on a rant, I'm looking at you, and I always off to my right see, "Don't tread on me," and believe me, I will not.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. All right, the next one, the other fee increase bill is House Bill 618 by Representative Dixon McMakin. He's bringing some real bangers this session, I have to say. This is I
Real bangers. I love that.
we had a win in House Commerce on this, Chris. It's not as ugly as it started out.
But what would
It's the
tell me?
LED business, the
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
raising
It's a
fees
good one.
for by
Yeah,
Louisiana Economic Development. And can you
yeah.
believe? I just want to, before I let you unleash on your rant, let me just also mention. Okay, this is the state that is trying to make it a more business-friendly state. So what we're doing is we're going to start with increasing fees at the Secretary of State, where you have to register your business, and with Louisiana Economic Development, where you may bring Chris, can you please make sense of it for me?
It's difficult. It's very difficult to make sense. And frankly, Danielle, every one of these bills is predicated on the false idea that we need the government's permission to exercise our own freedom. That's what this comes down to. That's the foundational lie that we're being told. You need our permission to exercise liberty and freedom for which our founding fathers gave their very lives. We got to get it's become a government privilege. Fortunately, this bill, and by the way, Danielle, we've had significant victories. I have to tell you that on balance, I'm cautiously optimistic and even optimistic about some of the things we've killed, some of the things that we're advancing, and some of the things that we may yet be able to kill. So I feel
Yeah.
very optimistic. But this bill, 618, Danielle, the big problem with it was that it would have allowed the Louisiana Economic Development Department to automatically increase fees, application fees, processing fees, and everything that businesses file automatically to keep up with the cost of inflation. So they wouldn't have to go back before the legislature every time they wanted to increase a fee. It would just be statutorily built in. Okay, inflation goes up. Look at the business index and see how much we can increase our costs and fees commensurately. That's not how it works. The legislature has to appropriate the funding of money. And fortunately, that bill, we opposed this. Fortunately, that was taken out of this bill. So it does still have one-time fee increases, which are not substantial, but nonetheless, they shouldn't have any fee increases. There's a one-time fee increase in this. And interestingly and very good is the fact that there is a mechanism that allows LED to waive even those fees if a small business or an individual can show an individualized hardship. So it is, I think it's not nefarious. The principle of them raising money for anything bothers me, but this bill is in much improved posture at this point, particularly with respect to the fact that they cannot automatically raise fees commensurate with inflation. So it's what started out really bad for Dixon has become less bad, and that's about as good as I can say for just about anything that Dixon McMakin files at this point. It goes from bad to hopefully less bad.
Okay. All right. Well, the next bill really got in my craw, Chris. This is Senate Bill 254 by Senator Beth Mizell. And this is her bill that she basically put a prohibition on surcharges for debit card use. So this, if you are at a small business and you are at the checkout, right? And they will say oftentimes there's a 3% or 1.8% charge to be able to use your card. Maybe there's a smaller fee to use your debit card, a higher fee to use your credit card, and they add that on to your bill. Now, this is happening at private pay healthcare facility that I go to. This is happening at the butcher shop that I go to. These are small businesses, right? So where does Beth Mizell get off saying that she can prohibit the surcharges for a debit card? Because the the fee has to get paid. The credit card company, the payment processor has to absolutely get paid. So does she think that the fee just goes away if she prohibits it? I'm not sure. I think as long as you give fair warning to people, it's absolutely reasonable to expect that you're going to pay that, because guess what? The next time you can bring cash if you don't like paying the fee. You're absolutely free to do that. But I guarantee you, one way or the other, the consumer is going to have to eat the cost of that. I don't know why she wants to punish small businesses who are using payment processors as a convenience to their customers. So I just have a big problem with it.
I totally agree with you, Danielle. This bill is I don't understand the bill. I mean, I do understand what it's saying. I don't understand why she would bring this. So you're saying, I mean, so a bank this only deals with debit cards, by the way,
Yeah.
Danielle, not credit cards. So a retailer, say your butcher shop, is charged by the debit card processor or the bank, a certain fee for using that system
Yeah.
to enable a customer to use it. The retailer is hit with a cost for that. She's saying that they're not entitled as a within the context of their business to pass that cost off to their customer.
Well, I'll tell
What
you. So she's
business?
saying it has to be considered the same as cash, which, okay, you treat debit cards as if they are cash, but I'm telling you, okay, so Walgreens does not pass along that charge. Big grocery stores are not passing along that charge because they
Because
can
right,
build
the
that
reason
into the
why,
cost of
Danielle,
business.
the reason
But
why they're not
it's
passing
still
along that
built in.
charge. Yeah,
It's still
the
built
reason why
into
they're
the
not
cost of
passing along
goods.
that charge, the reason why they're not passing along that charge is because they've just raised the cost of their
Exactly.
goods across the board.
Exactly. And we should think no differently about it. And so the fact that, I mean, to me, it feels like a very small-minded bill, because just because your debit card is using cash out of your account does not mean it's the same as cash. It costs something to use.
So Daniel, tell me if I'm right about this. So the bottom line is, someone comes in to your retailer, and let's just say it's prominently displayed up at the front. 2% surcharge, 3% surcharge for the use of your debit card. And the reason why they have to charge that is because the retailer is getting charged with a
Yeah.
fee for the processing of it. So all they're doing, this is not a windfall to a retailer, Senator Mizell. I don't understand when in the history of economic transactions in our state has a retailer not had the freedom to pass a direct cost off to a customer. So the retailer has to eat this cost and yet continue to provide this convenience to the customers. Is that what she's saying, Danielle?
Essentially, yes. Yes. And so I think this is a nasty bill. It is heading to the House unopposed. I'm guessing it goes, my guess would be, Chris, next stop would be House Commerce Committee. So good luck to us there for their grand understanding of economics. But I just think this is another bill that disadvantages small businesses and has no impact on big businesses, and it's also completely it it doesn't even show any recognition that there's any cost that exists, and I think to me that maybe is the most troubling part of this.
Exactly. I mean, I don't understand. That's the most important consideration. There's a big difference between a windfall to a retailer and sort of the defraying of a cost that they have that they expend for the convenience of their customer. I don't understand why they're not allowed to. And by the way, Danielle, one of the justifications for this bill is that the customer has a right to know if the shirt says $10 and you go up and use a debit card, they have a right to know that that's exactly what it's going to cost. And when you do this surcharge, it costs $10.99 or $11.30, this, that, and the other. And I should say, okay, well, why don't you apply that to the 11% sales tax that the government charges on every
Amen, brother.
transaction in Louisiana that customers have no idea about before they walk up to a counter? Why don't you eliminate that using the same rationale that you're using to justify this legislation? It just seems so disingenuous and so hypocritical to me.
It is. It is. So we're fired up about that one, and I hope the schedule works out, Chris, that you're able to testify against this because we need people to testify against this. This is a I think a great matter of concern to small business owners. This could cost small business owners thousands of dollars a year, and that could be the difference between red or black on your books.
And Danielle, I know before we go on, I have to say this. You know, the overarching principle of this is this. Where in the Constitution
Yeah.
does the government get the authority, once again, to inject itself in a relationship between a private retailer and a private citizen? Where does the government get this authority in the Constitution?
Yeah.
If
Nowhere.
anybody can show me that, I would be absolutely thrilled and shocked to see it.
Yeah. Well, I think Senator Mizell just needs to get into the habit of carrying cash, and she wouldn't be running into this issue.
Amen.
All right. Next up, Senate Bill 280, Chris. This is by Senator Mark Abraham. It looks on its face as a completely benign bill, as they
You there?
like to do. Contractors, very, very specific to well drilling. Oh, hold on. Can you hear me now?
I
Am
can
I
hear you
coming
now.
through?
Yeah. Go,
Am I?
go back to
Okay,
Abraham.
sorry. Yeah, my Wi-Fi just
No problem.
had a moment. Okay, so Senator Mark Abraham's bringing this bill. It's related to the authority of the state licensing board for contractors, and it gives them the authority to issue certain licenses. But those certain licenses are very specific to well drilling contractors. And we have some concerns about that because, of course, if you are listening to anything about wells right now, I think, what is it, class 4, class 5, and 6 injection wells, are they all carbon capture related, Chris, I believe?
Absolutely.
This bill passed through committee with amendments. I haven't yet had a chance to look at the amendments, but I'm not sure, Chris, if you have.
I haven't had a chance to look at the amendments. I did look at the original bill. Bottom line is this, Danielle. There's no need for this.
Yeah.
There is no need for this legislation. And, you know, it never ceases to amaze me at times what our legislature chooses to prioritize. And this is an example of that. You know, the contract should be awarded uniformly across the board. There should be no preference for what I think this could be, Danielle, an attempt to make it easier on the people who do use the wells for CCS. But I want to go back and look at these amendments and see where we are on this. This is not I don't think it's a make or break issue. We have to defeat carbon capture, sequestration, hide, hair, and guts, as my old friend from up in Shreveport, Rayburn Foster, used to say. We got to take it down, boy, hide, hair, and guts. And we have to do that, and we're going to do that. But, you know, let's keep rocking and rolling, Danielle.
Yeah, and one last bill, Chris, before we wrap up for the day, and that is Senate Bill 29 by Senator Patrick McMath. This is his bill that would require coroners to publish the vaccine, or to include the vaccination record of an infant's sudden death. It passed the House 35-0, or rather passed the Senate floor 35-0, and now it's headed to the House.
We very much supported this legislation. There are a lot of people who listen to the State of Freedom, a lot of families and parents across the state who are very, very concerned about the adverse effects of vaccines on both adults and children, and believe that many of these vaccines that children are required to take are connected to autism and other very significant ailments in children. This bill simply says that in a situation where a child between birth and the age of 15, I think, dies unexpectedly and suddenly, where there's no apparent cause for it, included in the death investigative report, you have to specifically document what, if any, vaccines that person received within 90 days of their death. You're right, there no longer requires a formal autopsy, but that information has to be included in the documentation fully and completely. And I think that Senator McMath looks upon it as another data point. And clearly it is another data point. And that's probably putting quite mildly in light of some of the evidence that we've seen about the harms of these vaccines. So I think it's a very good piece of legislation.
Yeah, and maybe Chris, before we go, I'll just read two recent chats from, well, two recent messages from the chats. Brian says it's called politifair when an elected official uses the weight of his office to punish another elected official or even a citizen or citizen group for countering the official's agenda. Oh, he's asking, is it? I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's a great term for it because
I love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. Great term, politifair. It's just the political equivalent of lawfare.
Exactly.
You know,
And
I love it.
yeah, it's great. Suzanne says it's more common than people realize that some powerful people will threaten local business owners' livelihoods, or the governor's henchmen threaten local parish government with withholding of state funds unless the elected officials capitulate. In St. Bernard Parish's opposition to Orleans and St. Tammany's LIT port proposal, we're standing up for our community's future. Thank you, Suzanne. Absolutely. We know that this is very real and the pressure is tremendous. So thank you for standing up for your community.
Absolutely. Can I speak to the lit issue real quick,
Yeah,
Danielle?
I don't know about it.
I guess Danielle is from. They want to build this huge port down there. The Port Authority of New Orleans wants to build this big port of New Orleans. And it's going to roll right through St. Bernard. There's only one problem. 73% of the citizens of St. Bernard Parish don't want it there. So they're threatening eminent domain. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer subsidies that are going to use it. Now, in fairness, there's also a lot of private money that's going to build this. But the bottom line is this. If the people who live in St. Bernard Parish, by the tune of 73%, don't want this in their parish, guess what? Don't put it in their damn parish. It's
Well, there you
that
go.
simple. And yet they're threatening people. They're continuing again to try to use eminent domain, which is going to require, so the building of this, I think it's called the corridor or something they need, it's going to require eminent domain, that seizure of private property along that corridor so that they can build this thing. So eminent domain threat of private property, and most importantly, the principle of subsidiarity, which is local government authority. Get this out of our parish. We don't want it. You know what they could do, Danielle? They could move it down the road to the Gulf of America and build it there. That's all they're asking. You have plenty of room. Just, I think it's south. Just go south, closer to the Gulf of America. Get it out of St. Bernard Parish. You could build a great port, and you wouldn't have to worry about clogging our roads or damaging our infrastructure, or or harming the basic local mobility or autonomy of our citizens. That's what's going on here, and that's why St. Bernard Parish is so upset about this. And you know what? If I lived there, I would be also.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems lately that the government's not going to let the people. Why should the government let the people get in the way of what the government wants to do? I mean, that's the crazy, weird mindset that these people are living under. And it's absolutely backwards. And I think it deserves massive, massive pushback. So
I
thank you
agree.
to anyone who is pushing back. And James asks, has anyone heard from Senator Mike Reese? He's been silent in the DeRidder-Leesville area since the special session. James, any more detail on that? I don't know what you mean, if we've heard from, or are you talking about a specific issue, or just has he been on the radar? Has he been out there?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
want to
know.
know that. I want to know that too, James, before we get off.
All right. Well, while we wait for James, Chris, maybe just a couple of announcements. Let me just check the calendar for next week. I think a big reminder, Tuesday, please plan to be, if you are at all able, get to the Capitol for the House Natural Resources Committee hearing. We want to make a very big showing to prove, if nothing else, besides proving Senate President Cameron Henry wrong, but also showing up to make sure that there is ample pressure on the legislators in that committee, because it is pretty much a 50-50 at this stage of the game.
It is, but we're doing a big graphic, Danielle. We're going to do a graphic. You know how Katie is, how brilliant she is with the graphic. We're going to put every member of the House Natural Resources Committee, every Republican, maybe all, but certainly every Republican, and the ones who support the good CCS legislation will go on the wall of the public wall of fame, and those who oppose the good CCS legislation will go on the public wall of shame and live forever in ignominy and be publicly exposed, chastised, and perhaps even ridiculed for betraying the interests of Louisiana citizens. All eyes on the House Natural Resources Committee, Danielle, and let me tell you what, there's going to be absolutely no self-restraint if they do the wrong thing here. You're going to have to really, really help me to exercise some modicum of self-restraint. Perhaps you could put one of those remote shock collars in my neck.
Look, James just got back to us. He says there's been a total lack of public interaction on CCS with regard to Senator Mike Reese.
That's what I thought that's exactly what I thought. That's exactly what I thought James was talking about, and I would agree with you, James. I've been to several town halls in your area, the area where Senator Reese represents, and I haven't seen him there. And so, you know, I'm confident that Senator Reese is not, a stalwart against carbon capture and sequestration. I know that, but I agree. Neither he nor many of these legislators have made their positions on this clear to the public, and they have a duty to do so.
Yeah. And the next announcement, okay, Tuesday we'll be back on as usual, 8 a.m. Wednesday will be Warrior Wednesday, so be prepared to be in the chat. And we've really loved all of the interaction today in the chat as well. And then Thursday is our interview with Commissioner of Insurance Tim Temple. So that should be a good conversation. Hopefully he's got some good insight for us on what has taken place or any improvements we've seen on rates and such since last year's session and what he's trying to accomplish this session.
Yeah. And remember, it's not free for us to do what we're doing here. It costs, it's infrastructure that costs money for the database, for setting all this up, for having the assistants and the producers to help us. We're fighting your battle for you. Okay, understand that. We're fighting your battle for you. We're going to win your battle for you, but we need loaded weapons. And the weapons, and in order to load the weapons, we have to have the money to continue to expand and fund our database and the people who help us with our production. It's got to be done. So if you like what you see on the State of Freedom, donate $10 a month, $15 a month, whatever you can do. It's very, very important. We're not asking you to go down to the legislature unless you want to. We're not asking you to come onto the State of Freedom. We're not asking you to go through 1,500 or 2,000 bills. We're asking you to give us the tools to fight for you. That's what we're doing at very minimal cost to you. That is something that you can do, and we're respectfully asking you to do it. Don't put it off another day. We need you to do this so that we can continue to build our infrastructure. We're talking about liberty here. We're talking about freedom here. And so put a little skin in the game here. We need you, and we will make you proud of us as we continue to move forward. And we're proud of you, and we're going to be even more proud of you if you go today and become an investor and a monthly donor in the State of Freedom. Even more proud.
Yeah, very well said, Chris, and thank you for that. And also advertise. If you have a small business, you can see that we really believe in small businesses here. We are fighting for the little guy. So if you have a small business or even a large business, please consider advertising with us or tap your friend on the shoulder who does have one and say, hey, there's this great podcast that will do you right. I think you ought to advertise with them.
Absolutely. And imagine that you wake up tomorrow morning, listeners, and you're really excited because you want to go listen to the State of Freedom because we bring you hope, we bring you reassurance, and we help you to believe in your state and in the progress toward victory, and you realize that the state of freedom is no longer exists because you didn't take the time to become a monthly donor. We're not saying it's going to come to that, but think about it. Think about it. Do your part. That's what we need. Do your part.
All right. And also, I want to put in a big plug for LeCag here as well. Chris is spending a lot of time and effort at the legislature. He is burning up his phone, contacting legislators on all of our behalf. So by all means, please support LeCag. Go there to lecag.org and join there as well. So
LACAG.org, LACAG.org. We're fighting it's really David and Goliath in the legislature. We're fighting against deep-pocketed special interests. So do $15 a month to the State of Freedom, do $15 a month to LeCag. Whatever you can do, just do it. But I'm not going to make any bones about it that if we're going to compete against very powerful special interest groups, both here on the State of Freedom and at the legislature, and be only supported by Louisiana citizens because we refuse to be compromised by the big special interests, you got to step up to the plate, okay?
Yeah.
And small donations across the state from citizens will get us exactly where we need to be. And we love y'all very, very much. And just thankful to have such great citizens, Danielle, who listen to and support us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I promised in the chat that you and I would both put out the information for Tuesday's hearing on our Facebook pages. So just keep me honest on that, so people who are interested in going know where and when and all of that. So
you're talking about just on the carbon capture issue?
Yeah.
Carbon capture and sequestration? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So just reminds me, Danielle, y'all for carbon capture and also for a broad range of issues, go to X is at LACAG. That's at LACAG on X. On Facebook, where we prominently feature as well, it's just LACAG. So we're always giving legislative updates.
I think
up on
yours
our
is
social media.
I think yours is LeCag.org on X.
That's the X feed?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's at LeCag.org on X. Sorry, at LeCag.org. And Facebook is just LeCag, LACAG,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So keep up with us, follow us, and share anything you need to know about what's going on in your government. You can find it there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Chris, God bless you. And we will be back here Tuesday morning, 8 a.m., bright and early.
And in the words of the immortal William F. Buckley Jr., Danielle, who's looking down on us from the blessed isles of ever after, inveighing we shall go.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business. Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at LeCag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative podcast.